Welcome back to another episode of Bucket List Living with Brad Norwood. I'm your host, Brad Norwood, and with me today, a world-renowned speaker, marketing guru expert, author of over 10 books, editor in 6 more. The books you've probably heard of are The New Rules of Marketing and PR, and most recently, you followed my journey, you know I've read it, Fanocracy. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome David Meerman Scott to the episode. David, welcome.
Hey, Brad, how's it going? It's really great to be here. I appreciate you having me on. And I also very much appreciate seeing your physical copy of Fanocracy there.
Well, it's a great read. And tribute, this is episode 2 of season 2. And I was thinking about this as I was coming back to the studio today. Jesse Cole was episode 2 of season 1 for me. And that's the connection that we have. As you know, Jesse's a wonderful guy.
Yeah. Super cool guy.
Yeah. And I learned of you through him, and his book was great. And as soon as I heard your episode on Business Done Differently, I immediately got a copy. It's a great book. If you're listening and not watching, Fanocracy by David Meerman Scott. We're going to talk about that today. And let's get right into it, David.
Sure.
I open the book and you start right away, chapter 1, with the story of Brian Halligan and HubSpot.
Yeah.
And you flip out your laptop and you're a deadhead. Forgive me. I'm not a music lover as you are, but you're a deadhead. And I know we've got deadheads listening to the show. You've got your Grateful Dead sticker on the laptop. Tell us the story, how it goes with Brian.
Yeah. So it was way back in 2007, and Brian and his team had read a book of mine called The New Rules of Marketing and PR. And so they invited me into their office to chat about it. So I said, yeah, sounds great. I walked in, opened my notebook computer, and there on the back of my computer was a Grateful Dead sticker. And for those who are watching, I have a bunch of photos of the Grateful Dead behind me on the wall here. I'm a huge fan. And Brian said, hang on. We can't start this meeting until you tell me about that Grateful Dead sticker on your computer. So I said, I love the Grateful Dead. And went to my first concert when I was 17 years old. I've been to, something like 25 concerts since then. And Brian said, I love the Grateful Dead too. They're my favorite band. I've been to 100 concerts. So we became fast friends literally in the first minute that we met each other, because we're part of the same tribe, because we're both fans of the Grateful Dead. And that was a really interesting moment for me, because it just struck me as how powerful it is, this idea of when people share a fandom, and also how powerful it is that people are passionate enough about something to want to share it with the world. And in my case, having a sticker on the back of my computer and having some photographs on the wall behind me as we're doing this episode right now. And that became sort of emblematic of this book, Fanocracy, that I wrote. By the way, my co-author of Fanocracy, you didn't mention, is my daughter, Reiko. She's 27 years old and currently an emergency room resident. She's a doctor at Boston Medical Center. She's treating COVID. So she's on the front lines, and Tony Robbins wrote the foreword to the book.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I want to get into that. So I've been thinking about this in the podcast with you and just getting to know you. One of the items on my bucket list is to write a book. I don't know what I'm going to write about one day, but one day I want to write a book. And then I think about how hard that is, but then talk about the process of writing a book with your daughter, not only with someone, but with your daughter. How cool is that? Tell us about that process. Like, do you sit down together and write, or how does that work?
So first of all, you should write a book, but don't just have it on a list. Like, figure it out and do it and make it happen.
Exactly.
Do you know what the rocking chair test is, Brad?
I don't.
The rocking chair test is when you're 90 years old, on your porch, in your rocking chair, rocking back and forth. You don't want to look back on your life and have certain regrets. I mean, you always have some probably, but if you can imagine yourself being 90 years old on your rocking chair, if you feel that it would be a big regret in your life not to have written a book, then you've got to figure it out.
Right.
My recommendation is to, if you are going to write a book, to just look at the world and look at patterns in the universe that you see that feel interesting to you that many people are not talking about, and that could be the topic of a book. Or what are the questions that you keep coming back to when you're interviewing guests like me? I mean, obviously you love this idea of the bucket list. So think about maybe writing a book about that, perhaps. But yes, you should do it. So anyway, my daughter and I decided to write Fanocracy together because I was sharing with her how much I love the Grateful Dead, and she was sharing with me how much she loves Harry Potter. And she's not only read every book multiple times and every movie multiple times, but has written an 85,000 word alternative ending novel to the Harry Potter series, where Draco Malfoy is a spy for the Order of the Phoenix, and put that on a fan fiction site that's been downloaded thousands of times and commented on hundreds of times. So we're both geeks. I've seen the Grateful Dead now 100 times, many times with Brian Halligan, by the way, from HubSpot. Draco dug into Harry Potter. So we decided to dig in together to this idea of fandom. And we started writing, it was about 2.5 years ago, we started writing the book. And at first, we tried to write in one voice, and a book, a unified voice that was sort of a mixture of my words and her words. And it wasn't working. And it just wasn't working. And we were trying to figure out what was going on. And what we realized is that by writing as a unified voice, we were sort of smoothing out the interesting parts of each of our voices. So what we ended up doing, as you know, because you've read the book, is I wrote some chapters and she wrote some chapters. And therefore, we were able to let our own voices come through. And then, so she would write a chapter, and then I would read it. I would write a chapter, and she would read it, and we'd edit each other and provide comments and go back and do a rewrite and do that process again and again and again until we felt good about it. And interestingly about the process was she had to feel totally comfortable saying, you know, Daddy, this is no good. You've got to rewrite this. And, you know, we spent 20 years of our relationship together where I was the boss and she was the kid, and she was under my house, you know, my roof, and I was paying the bills. And now all of a sudden she is an absolutely equal partner and has to be comfortable telling me I'm wrong, which she absolutely did, and I absolutely accepted. So we ended up in strengthening our relationship as a result of writing together.
Yeah, and I want you to talk about that. So literally, were there times when you were together in the same room and wrote together, or did you separate, have to be kind of in your own area? And then with that, 2 parts, David, talk about the bond, the special bond that formed with your daughter during that process.
My daughter actually has her own apartment. So she was living at her apartment, which it's close. It's about 15 miles from my house. So we didn't physically write in the same room, although very often we would meet, but that was more just to talk about ideas and talk about stories we could include, and just sort of generally talk about the idea of fandom. So when we wrote independently, then we shared through email, and we read independently. And then we would frequently get on phone calls and talk things through, or meet in person and talk things through. But it was an interesting bond because my daughter's newly married. She actually got married during the process of producing the book, and she's been together with her now husband since they were 16. So they were together way, way, way before we started this project. And so what was interesting about it for the two of us, and one of the main reasons why it brought us together, is it was a project for just the two of us.
Yeah.
My wife, who's also a writer, by the way, my wife writes in the Japanese language, and has written, I think, 6 or 8 books, and is the Japan correspondent for Newsweek. And, you know, she's a good, big, powerful writer as well.
Wow.
And, so what was interesting was this project, Fanocracy, was a project simply between my daughter and I. My wife was not involved, and my daughter's husband, Ben, was not involved. So it was just the two of us. And for that reason, it was a really special experience, because most of the time, it'd be when our daughter was young, it was the three of, we only have one child. It was the three of us in the family. We would do everything together as a threesome. And then after Reiko became serious and then engaged and then married to Ben, he was he is now part of the family too. And now it's a foursome.
Sure.
But the book is just the two of us. So it was a really special experience.
That's fun. And we talk about a lot of that in the bucket list life plan, the letter L standing for legacy, and what a legacy you've already have to leave behind. But now as part of Rico's story too, to say, look, I did this with the man that loved me even more than you, Ben, my dad. And she can always have that. What a special moment. That's awesome.
And speaking of legacy, I had a really cool opportunity back in January of last year, almost exactly a year ago, as we're recording this, where I found out that Fanocracy made the Wall Street Journal bestseller list.
Yeah.
So I texted Reiko and I said, it was early in the morning that it was announced, it came out that week. And I texted her and said, when you're awake and you've had your cup of tea, please call me. And so she called pretty early. It was like 7 o'clock in the morning. She said, I said it in such a way that I don't want to worry her.
Sure.
I never contact her at 6 in the morning and ask her to call me. But so she called me and I said, congratulations, you're a Wall Street Journal bestselling author. So speaking of legacy,
yeah, absolutely.
that's something that will be on her resume for the rest of her life.
Well, and that falls under the why too, your proudest achievement. And so what a remarkable way for her to start, I guess, continue her writing career, because she does so with the Harry Potter series. That's amazing.
No, she's still writing. She's writing. We don't have any other projects we're doing together, but she's doing some things on her own, which is super cool.
That's great. That's great. Dave, you'd mentioned too, back to Brian and the deadheads and creating a tribe. I want to talk about that, the tribe, because just being from Arkansas, simple old Arkansas, right? We're sports fans and all we have here is the Razorbacks. And one of the things that I usually do when I travel is I always have a Razorback, either on a hat,
Nice.
a visor, or shirt,
Nice.
right? But talk about how it's those things, those symbols, the tribe that bring people together. Talk about that.
It's absolutely true. One of the really interesting aspects of doing our research for Fanocracy, the book, is that Reiko's undergraduate degree is in neuroscience, which she did at Columbia University in New York. And so we really wanted to dig into the neuroscience aspect of this idea of fandom. And so we interviewed a number of different neuroscientists and did a bunch of research. And we learned that it turns out that all of our brains are hardwired. We as humans are hardwired to want to be part of a tribe of like-minded people. And that goes back countless generations, thousands of years in human history, because when you're with your tribe of people, going way, way, way back, it's, walking around on the plains or in the woods. And if you're with your tribe, that means you're safe and comfortable. And if another tribe of people comes along, you're more easily able to defend yourself because you've got your people with you. If a wild animal comes along, same thing. So that's actually remained in our brains, even here in 2021, because this idea of wanting to be part of a tribe is rooted, hardwired in our brains. So once we figured that out, it explained a lot of the different aspects of this idea of wanting to be part of a tribe and fandom. And in your case, the Razorbacks, in my case, the Grateful Dead, my daughter's case, Harry Potter. But here's the thing that's also really interesting is that when you share something that you're passionate about, people can appreciate that even if they don't share that same passion.
That's right.
So I can appreciate that you're a Razorbacks fan. I get it. I understand it because, and I appreciate that passion. And it shows that you're not just a rigid person who's only by the books, only the only thing I do is my podcast and that's it, or you're someone who's interested in other aspects of life and you share that by virtue of wearing the hat or talking about it, which is super cool.
Sure.
And that became a really important element of this idea of fanocracy from the perspective of how we do business. And for example, we have examples of all kinds of businesses that have built fandoms. And many times people say to me, but David, we can't build fans because we're not that type of business. We're not a sports team. We're not a book.
Right,
We're not a rock band. I mean, we found examples of all different kinds of organizations that have built fans in this way. So one of my favorite examples is a company called Hagerty, and they do automobile insurance. Specifically, they do classic car auto insurance, cars that are over 25 years old. And so Hagerty, McKeel Hagerty is the entrepreneurial CEO. I had a chance to interview him twice. And what McKeel told me was, David, we can't do business the way every other insurance agency does. We don't want to be the low-cost provider. We don't want to spend more money on advertising than the other guy. So what we did is we went out and established that we're going to grow our business as a result of growing fans. And so they do a number of things at Hagerty Insurance. We're in a pandemic now, but normally they go to over 100 classic car shows a year, and they're there. They have a pitch a tent at the classic car show. They're there mingling with fans of classic cars. They're providing answers to questions. They're just being there as part of that tribe of classic car auto collectors. They have a YouTube channel where they provide tons of free content. And they have over 1 million subscribers. They have a drivers club where they bring people together in a club, 650,000 members. And what people can do is they can be a part of the group who owns the same kind of car that they have. And that's a little subgroup of the Classic Car Club. And they also realized that they had a database of millions and millions and millions of valuations of classic cars. So they realized they had more data around the value of classic cars than anybody else in the world. And so they made that data freely available, unlike most companies that keep that as proprietary. So all of those things added up. People say, wow, I love Hagerty. I'm part of the Hagerty tribe. And that's what happened to me, which is how I ran across the company, is because I have a vintage 1973 Land Rover, and it's been insured by Hagerty for nearly 20 years. And so I've become a fan of Hagerty because of these reasons I shared. And what's interesting about when you become a fan is that it takes a lot to have you go away from a company that you're a fan of.
Right.
Now, Hagerty, I've been with for almost 20 years. If there's a company that comes along and says, David, we also do classic car insurance, and we're going to give you our insurance, same exact product as Hagerty for 20% less, I would say no.
Sure.
Because I'm a fan of Hagerty. And so, in your case, imagine another team says, hey, we have better games than the other guy. We have better food than the other guy. No, you're a Razorbacks fan. So
that's right.
So that's the idea here, is how can you as a business person build a tribe of like-minded people? Or how can you as an individual live your life such that you're passionate about the things you love and you share that passion with other people?
Yeah, I love that. And I want to talk about the incentive travel part that I'm involved with corporations. Mm-hmm. And how important is it not only to have our customers as fans, but our employees as fans? How important is that?
Oh, that's absolutely huge. And getting back to Brian Halligan, who's the CEO of HubSpot, when I first started, when I first met Brian back in 2007, HubSpot had no customers. They only had just started their company less than a year earlier. And I joined their advisory board to help them on these ideas of how to build fans. And they've absolutely crushed it since then. They now have over 4,000 employees from 8 when I joined them. They have nearly 100,000 customers. They're on track to do $650 million in revenue this year. And the last time I checked, they're nearly a $20 billion market cap on the New York Stock Exchange. So an absolutely unbelievable success story from little tiny minuscule startup when I joined their advisory board to this massive success. And if you ask Brian, he'll say one of the reasons is because they've made fans of their employees.
Yeah.
They've created an organization where they have truly focused on employees, and they do some really remarkable things that other companies don't. For example, the vacation policy is there is no vacation policy.
Right.
You take what you need. And that's it. That's the vacation policy.
Yep.
They have a wiki for that anybody in the company can have access to, and they put so much valuable information on there that everybody in the company is considered an insider from the perspective of the stock exchange because of the sorts of information they put on there. And they have what's called the HubSpot Culture Code, which is a publicly available document. If you just search HubSpot Culture Code, you'll find it. And it's been viewed, last time I checked, it's probably more now, 4 million times by people to see how does this company's culture contributing to its unbelievable financial success. All of this added up, you probably know the company Glassdoor. Glassdoor measures employee satisfaction.
Right.
Through employees talking about their company on the Glassdoor social network. And HubSpot was rated the #1 place to work for in the entire United States for 2020. And so, I mean, what an amazing experience. So
Yeah.
your question around employees is such an important one, because when your employees are happy, they're passionate about the company that they work for, that passion is infectious and it spreads. And that's one of the things that drives clients, drives customers, drives loyalty, people coming back again and again.
Sure. Builds that tribe, doesn't it? Invites others in, and the tribe just goes.
Absolutely.
I love that. I love how that's ingrained. David, let's talk about too, as we continue on that conversation with employees and fans, and you talk about in your book, and I absolutely love this because as a child growing up in the 80s, autographs were the thing, right? I mean, I
Yep.
was a Denver Bronco fan. I remember going to training camp in Greeley, Colorado, and standing in line just waiting to get John Elway's autograph
Nice.
and
Nice.
Sammy Winder and all the old Broncos. And now in today's world, and you brought this up, and I think Ellen DeGeneres was probably the one that made it everybody realize it. But you bring it up in your book and how important it is that to get close. And you mentioned that selfies today are the new autographs.
Yeah.
But talk about how important it is to get close.
Yeah, interestingly, because as we're recording this, we're in the middle of a pandemic, we're in a little bit of a different situation. However, another aspect of neuroscience that we found out is that this idea of being a part of a tribe, a lot of that has to do with physical proximity to other people. And it turns out the most powerful human connections happen the closer you are to another human being. So if you're with your tribe and you're close to somebody, that's great. You feel great about it. But if you're not with your tribe and you're next to somebody, you can feel weird about that. Like if you get into a crowded elevator or a crowded subway train car in a big city, you can feel strange that you're close to somebody and for that same reason. And so what does this mean? Well, again, we're in a pandemic, so we're in a weird situation right now. But under normal circumstances, if you can figure out ways to get close to your customers physically, that's a truly powerful thing. And there's one neuroscientist whose name is Edward T. Hall, who identified that there are several different levels of proximity. So he identified, first of all, further than 20 feet, or sorry, further than 12 feet is what he calls public space. And when someone is in your public space or further than 12 feet away from you, you know they're there, but your mind doesn't actually track them, your unconscious mind. But inside of 12 feet, from about 12 feet to 4 feet, he calls social space. And social space, our minds begin to track people. And hence social distance means push people beyond 4 feet. And then inside of 4 feet is called personal space, where the most powerful human connections happen. And so normally, not during a pandemic, but normally, how can you bring people within 4 feet? That's cocktail party distance, interestingly, 4 feet. And so here's something else about neuroscience that's super interesting. There's another form of neuroscience called mirror neurons, the part of our brains that fire when we see somebody doing something, or even hear somebody doing something as if we're doing it ourselves. So I'm going to demonstrate for you something now, Brad. Those of you who are watching on video can see it. If you're listening in, listen in and imagine what I'm doing. So I'm currently holding a lemon and a slice of lemon in my hand. And if I take a bite of this lemon, wow, it's super powerful to bite a lemon, and my mouth is puckering up. I can feel it on my lips and on my tongue, and my eyes close and are watering a little bit. It's powerful to bite into a lemon. I'm tasting it. My brain is firing, but Brad, your brain is firing too, right?
I got to have some water.
It's crazy, right? Isn't it awesome? So that's the idea of mirror neurons. It's the part of our brains that fire when we see somebody doing something as if we're doing it ourselves. So here's where this becomes super interesting for right now during a pandemic around fandom and around building a tribe is you and I right now are doing a video. And the way that I've got my camera, those of you who are watching know this, those of you who are just listening, I'm about 4 feet away from the audience. Now the camera actually is a little bit closer, but the way that I'm standing is I'm standing such that I'm appearing about 4 feet away from people who are watching this video. Again, cocktail party distance. Again, personal space. The most powerful human connections happen in personal space. Now, the reason this is interesting is because in this form of mirror neurons, our brains are processing this video as if we are in the same room.
That's right.
Now, intellectually, we know that David is not in the same room. I happen to be just outside of Boston, so I'm, 1,500 or 1,600 miles away from you, maybe 1,800 miles away from you, Brad, right now. I might be 3,000 miles away from you. I might be 10,000 miles away from you if you're in somewhere like Australia. And even though you intellectually know I'm really far away because I'm in Boston, your brain fires as if we're in the same room because of those mirror neurons. So that means the more you can use video right now, especially during the pandemic, but at any time, on your social networks, use video, on your website, use video. If you're going to create a podcast, do what Brad's doing, make that video a part of your podcast, is a super interesting way to build fans.
Yeah, and it was an inspiration to me actually to do this podcast through video when I started. I read your book this past summer, and it's amazing how you mentioned the social distancing outside of 4 feet, right? I'm reading through that in the book, and I'm going, oh my gosh, maybe this is where they came up with the social distancing. I don't know. Maybe Mr. Hall invented it himself. I don't know.
He named it. And maybe I'm not sure if that's why they call it social distancing. They pulled it from Edward T. Hall's descriptions, but it's absolutely the same place. It's beyond 4 feet.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's the science and the neuroscience behind that is just, you take a great deep dive in your expertise in that in your book, Fanocracy. So Dave, look, it's time for us to get close to wrap it up. I have to respect your time, and we're so grateful that you joined us. Before we end, I want to ask what you are being intentional about today.
It's every single day. I'm intentional about a few things. First of all, every single day I exercise. I'm intentional about keeping my body fit and strong. And that actually happened starting 10 years ago when I hit my 50th birthday. I'm very close to hitting my 60th birthday, and I've been super fit since then. I'm 60 pounds lighter than I was when on my 50th birthday. Very intentional about that. And I feel like I'm in the final third of my life. The first third of my life was about learning. It was about learning in formal schools, about learning on the job. The second third of my life was about acquisitions, acquiring a family, acquiring financial resources. I'm a collector, acquiring things. And the final third of my life, I feel, is very intentional about giving back to the community, giving back by doing this podcast, for example. And so I'm very intentional about that.
Well, we appreciate that. And again, I appreciate your time. This is the first time David and I have ever spoken. Again, we were connected through Jesse Cole, our good friend, who's the owner of the Savannah Bananas. If you're listening and haven't listened to that episode, my goodness, go listen to that episode and listen to Jesse's podcast as well. David's been a guest on there. So, David, before we go, how can people reach you? They want to order Fanocracy. Obviously, it's on Amazon and that kind of thing. But how can they find you? I know you're a speaker. No events aren't going on right now. I know you're doing some things virtually. How can they get a hold of you?
So if you're interested in Fanocracy, we have a great website at www.fanocracy.com. And if you're an audiobook person, like many people who listen to podcasts, interestingly, prefer their books to be read to them. My daughter and I did read the book ourselves. Oh, wow. So check out the audiobook or the print book or the Kindle version or other ebook versions. And on most of the social networks, I'm DM Scott, DMSCOTT.
Great. I'll put it in the show notes as well if you missed any of that. David, once again, thank you so much. I am a huge fan of yours and hope to create many more to join the tribe. Our best wishes to you. Thanks to all of you who are listening and watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel so that you can get Bucket List Living each and every week. Until then, remember, the bucket list life is a life worth living. Have a great day.